who uses AI strictly for internal stuff these days? Not for your job, just for emails, like that piece in the workplace. All right, now this is the more important question. Who's using AI as part of their, SCADA systems, OT security, compliance? So it hasn't kind of really integrated into your core functionality. It's just basically being used for supporting roles. So basically, from our perspective, we're looking at this and stating, the agenda will be like AI's impact on development, because that's where we see the biggest gains. We're going to talk about the data architecture that enables AI or enables what we're going to present from a UI perspective, and how we rethink of the interface. So the concept that we have is that we collect data on your behalf, we normalize it. How you interact with that data, that's what is available to you now that wasn't available to you before without AI. And then obviously we're going to go through the live demos. They're going to be tons of fun. You can chuckle at them. We're not stating that any of this development is going to be put in the product. We're going to look to you to give us ideas on what's important to you, what problems that you need to solve in your everyday workday, and then we'll position our AI development based on your input. Next slide. So AI's impact, what's really the impact? So most importantly, we can deliver more solutions to you. The development can be done faster, but where we see the biggest gains is being able to pull out deeper information. So basically, surface insights that weren't typically possible with you leveraging an Industrial Defender, UI that was built for several different reasons and not core to your everyday workday. So intentional, what that means for you is that basically you're first in our development now. So before we had to, drive a solution for everyone, but now we're looking at you first. We're also going to be transparent. So any AI we do is not going to be a black box. So that's also important to understand how the AI is basically delivered and deployed in your solution so that it's not a black box and you're confident in the solution or the data that it feeds back to you. And it's, again, specifically built for you. And that's very important here. What makes your job easier? What problems are you trying to solve? And how can we do that faster? So we talked about this, right? So we look at AI and what we can do on a 3-layer model. So the data interface, collecting data. We do that for all of you right now, and that we're very good at that. Storage and normalization, that's also important as a foundational element. It's not just enough to collect data. You have to store it and normalize it so that it can be used effectively in any type of user interface. And from a user interface perspective, this is where we allow you to see and query information that you want. Dashboards. Now, right now, the UI interface is stagnant. It's fixed and it provides solutions for several different problems: events, compliance, reporting. But it may not be the right fit for you. So again, everything is trending down. UI development is trending down. So more user interfaces are at reach with what we're doing, what we can do with AI. And again, we're specifically looking to build for how you actually work, not how a developer or an engineer or a product manager creates the user interface, but specifically to handle your everyday job opportunities. Again, the real investment is the data, and we already have that. We store it, we normalize it. The UI on top of that is now going to become flexible and curated specifically for your job. Again, the foundation is here, right? So basically, data collection is strong within the Industrial Defender platform. We have multiple different methodologies and mediums to collect information. And then what makes us differentiated is that we then normalize it. So everything looks the same, whether it's in a SCADA system, a DCS system, a firewall, a switch. All of the data is normalized so that wherever you go, whichever asset you touch, the data looks the same. So what that gives you is a foundation for UI and the user experience. So from our perspective, is if we've given you the foundation, we can now develop AI-influenced user experiences that are curated for you specifically and curated to solve problems and not just generic UIs. So now, this is where we're going to kind of we're going to transition. We're going to go from how we think about AI within the Industrial Defender environment, and we're going to provide you some demonstrations on what we've done for this user group conference. None of these are actually developed or committed to being in the solution, but we want to get your feedback so that we can understand which direction we should take. Jeff?
So this is what we've been showing. This is 8.2. This is our demo system. This is a live system. Nothing new on here right now. Like George said, AI, one of the things we're realizing is AI is taking that UI layer and it's enabling anybody to build any UI as long as you've got a really solid foundation on the data, which we believe we have. So I've got two things to demo. One is kind of fun. One is a little more serious. And then Greg's going to demo a third. This first one was a weekend hobby project of one of our developers. It's in no way something we would ship. It doesn't have product management approval, but he said, what would happen if we took live data and we just built a video game out of it? Like, how hard would that be with AI? So he took an actual running ASM, hooked into the data, and he created the realm of drift. And he worked with AI to say, how could we let's just go to the absurd and let's take this to something. How could we model data in a way that's like a video game? And so in this world, the drift sits between order and entropy. Assets are citizens, reports are sanctuaries, and every exception is a quest marker. And so he said, well, let's create some characters here. We have George the Barbarian, which I think I'm going to select here. It should have been the pro underdog boxer, you know, the Rocky Balboa, but we went with Conan the Barbarian here. So I'm going to log into the realm as George. And I'm just going to show you a little bit here. So we see George and he's walking around here and aimlessly. And we're just going to zoom out a bit if I can find the zoom out button. There it is. So we've got all of our assets in their groups. So if you remember from the demos earlier, you may have seen this. We have Site A and Site B, which are different, OT organizations. It's the way he's got his assets group and assets grouped. And we can walk around. For example, we see there's the Rockwell 1756. It's a little further down. So I'm going to go down here and find that asset. And here we are at the Rockwell 1756. You can see it there. And it's going to tell me a little bit about that asset as I come up to it. As I said, the idea is that an asset is a quest giver and it's got different quests you could take. And so we look at this and it's got a baseline exception. It's got some vulnerabilities. We can actually inspect that when we go up to it. And so that's like, I'm going to fight this asset. And hey, let's talk to this asset and have it describe its some information to us. And so the asset speaks to us in a neutral operations voice. I'm the PLC of Site B, stationed in Site B. My burden is 1 baseline exception, 7 vulnerabilities, and 0 policy exceptions. My risk rises because of 1 configuration exception, 7 vulnerability findings. I answer to Greg, because Greg's marked as the asset owner. And I'm currently in Site B. So, again, we didn't spend a lot of time on this, so I can get into I can get myself wound up on different things here, but we can start talking to this. So tell me about your interfaces or who owns you. The owner is Greg. Or which reports are you in? So I'm in the daily drift ledger. You can imagine different ways you'd interact and ask the asset question. This is just like right-clicking on an asset and getting a context menu. But we just thought, hey, let's try it. But the cool, and the point here is not that I think this is a great way to interact with assets. The point here is that very easily we said, I want to build it like a game, and we did it. And if you have a specific problem and said, I really need a UI that does this, maybe in a future state, we just build that UI for you. Like we said, what's the problem first? Let's just build that rather than build a UI that solves all of the problems. And so that's some of the stuff. We can stabilize this asset, which will automatically approve all of the baseline exceptions, put in mitigations for the vulnerabilities, and now you see that this asset is no longer burdened. It's now a green asset. If we look a little closer here, we have an auditor snooping around over there. And so, we thought, well, that would be funny. What if we put an auditor in here, like a boss fight? And so if I get close to this auditor, he attacks me. And so now I'm interacting with the NERC SIP auditor, and I can run a checklist here. So let's go through all of our audit challenges. It looks like it's going to pass here. So there's a random chance you fail on this little interaction, but we just passed that. Maybe we can look at some of the questions that an auditor might ask, and if I'd have heard the talk from earlier first, I could have put in the right answers, but here's some stuff an auditor might ask you. Anyway, you get the idea. We can have fun with this, and we can do what we want. So that was our little idea with a video game. And in that one, we said, again, what if we just took the UI and took it to the absurd and made it into something? The next question, which is a little more interesting, a little more real, is what if you had no UI? Because I got to click through a bunch of buttons, but I just want to get my job done. I just want to ask what I want to ask. And so what we've played with here is like a chatbot, like you're starting to see in a lot of the products that you're using. And something we're trying to be really careful about is that we don't just add AI to add it, but we add it like to have some real value. And so what I've got here is a chatbot connected to asset data. So this is cloud, right? We wouldn't be able to do this in a SIP environment or in an isolated environment. And we're looking at what we can do with small language models. Could we ship it that way? But in this example, we've got it hooked up to the cloud because it's just easy to kind of start working with this and see like, well, if I had this, what could I do? What kinds of things could I query? So for example, I can say here, you can see some examples, but I'm just going to ask it, so which assets should I patch first? And I'm going to have to play the demo game where you try to stall while the thing answers. So that came back quicker than I saw. So based on authoritative asset rankings by baseline, you should prioritize matching the following assets. So this is from real data. And what happened here is the AI actually reasoned. It actually went through and looked through the vulnerabilities we have, the risk scores we have, and it prioritized a number of assets. So it said this L3 IDCM 211, it doesn't look very healthy. So if we look at that, it's got 200 and, a bunch of baselines. So I'm going to say, what baseline exceptions are there on that asset? And again, the idea here is let's take the UI out. Let's just prompt for what we want so that we don't have to guess what menus and reports and buttons you need. So, okay, well, great. There's a whole bunch of baseline exceptions. We have 419 configuration exceptions, 124 software exceptions, 265 patches. So I'm going to now say, well, hopefully this works. What are the software exceptions? And you'll note that I didn't put the asset back in there, right? So the AI keeps context as we're all getting familiar with. And so hopefully, yeah, there we go. So for this IDCM, there's 124 software exceptions there. So that's kind of neat. You can just query your data as you need to. There's no searching, filtering, no UI. Another good one we can say is show me all of my vulnerability. Show me the count of all of the vulnerabilities on my assets. So we were talking about reporting earlier, and this gets into the idea of you being able to craft your own custom report. So it's going to count vulnerabilities by asset. How about graph those vulnerability counts? And if everything works, it's going to draw us a little, there we go. So the little histogram there. Give that to me in a bar chart, which is what I thought it was going to do. I don't know why it decided to do a histogram that time. And so there, you got this. So now tell me about the vulnerability. And notice I'm not going to fix my typo on AV demo. And it might come back and tell us about the some of the CVEs on there. How do you play that game again? How do you do the delay thing? There we go. So here we've got a bunch of vulnerabilities, and I may say, okay, well, tell me more about that, and how should I remediate it? Because I think a lot of the work involved in vulnerability management is figuring out what to actually do. Well, we have all the asset data, so the AI should be able to tell us. See. Oh, that's why. Okay. Nah, yeah, that's right. What did I forget? The 2. All right, let's see that. So the idea here would be, could we get the AI to actually tell you, what should I do in priority specifically? Because we have all the asset data. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, so this specifically pulled it out of our database. And if we were to put this in the product, that's the whole thing about a disconnected situation. We would absolutely, yeah. So it pulled this out of the data that we send you in our vulnerability packages, and told me a little bit about that. And okay, next steps. So yeah, so it was too generic here, but you get the idea that given the asset information, we can marry that with AI, we can marry that with what you actually want to do, and create. We enable you to create your own workflows with the data. So these are some of the things we're thinking about. Again, this is the opposite of the we can go with the video game and we could make the UI as whatever you want, or we could just take the UI out and you can build your own charts, your own graphs. This is not a fully featured thing. This is just a demo to give you an idea, but it's doable, and we're starting to play with it to see what we can do, and I'm really excited about it. So,
but imagine this from like a compliance perspective, where you could actually, maybe it's reaching out, the model's reaching out and saying, hey, I have a NERC SIP audit coming out on this date. Can you make sure that I'm, audibly compliant for this ESP and these assets? And instead of you having to slowly go through the whole process, it just understands what it needs to do and provides you a package that you would then hand an auditor. So, we're thinking about this in different kind of prisms. There's aspects where we're just interrogating the data. So I think that's the first place we're going to go to, just kind of interrogating it, illuminating patterns that you may not be able to extract through, the UI or through you as a human being. And then the next step is then automating tasks for you. So, now doing more with the solution, onboarding of assets, baseline handling, the things that take a lot of time, having the AI do that. So we're thinking about it from a piecemeal perspective, slowly introducing AI from a user experience perspective, reporting perspective, data handling perspective. Like each piece is being thought at from methodically, so that we just don't introduce AI for the sake of AI. We're introducing it to provide value to you, the end user.
Now I'm going to pass it to Greg, who's done a sort of well, you can explain it, a rework of the UI. Same thing. So I'm able to cheat and go straight into the database from an engineering perspective. Greg has done this all through the API, I believe, right? So
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
What I did this in about half a day, probably less, because I was dinking around with this, honestly. I basically used OpenAI, and I pointed OpenAI to our API documentation, and I pointed it to an IDCM, and I basically gave it the API secret. I hence learned I don't have to do that. It can do that for me and create an API secret itself. But I gave it the secret and the client number, which you need for that API integration. And I said, build me a dashboard. Let me know what you can do. And this month, what it came up with, it came up with a simpler version of this. And then I tweaked it for like 3 hours because it was so much fun to play around with this on the set. So we're looking at security events, and you can see my different locations and different asset groups. What are my noisiest assets, etc. All of this was built by AI. I didn't write a single line of code other than telling AI what to do, basically. I even told it to look at the color scheme on the IDCM UI and to mimic the color scheme of our standard IDCM UI. So the colors should be at least similar to our traditional UI. I can run specific queries if I want to. Show me vulnerability count as an example, and it just gives me that. And I've got 8,100 almost vulnerabilities. And then I can dig into each of these if I wanted to. These are different security events. If I want to look at firewall logs, I can dig into that. And then I can dig into these other categories I added later on: risk, network connections, and vulnerabilities. It was everything and that was just, I called it security events. But now if I click on something like network connections, it even gives me a poor man's network topology mapping, and to show me each subnet and the asset membership for each subnet. And basically all of this gets populated anytime I do a refresh. This is all hosted on my laptop, all the code's on my laptop. I hit refresh, and then, I don't know, 10 seconds later, I have a fully populated, current, up-to-date set of data to work with. Vulnerabilities, I can see all my vulnerable data across the environment as well. I can do vulnerability, I think I just did that one, vulnerability summary. And that's it. So I totally get jazzed on this, because now I'm thinking, wow, we could have feature-specific UI to the job that you're doing, right? So if you're doing something very specific, 1 page, 3 widgets, build it, right? And it can be done in 30 minutes to get your job done day in and day out, which could be very different from the UI that the person sitting next to you is using against the same data set to do their job, whatever their job happens to be. And I'm jazzed about this, honestly. I think this is great. And a lot of this, honestly, has to do with the robustness, just to talk up engineering and product management a bit, the robustness and the completeness of our APIs to be able, I can do anything, basically, that our UI, our traditional UI that you have been working with, anything that you can see through that, I can pull into my own UI here. So it's very...
Yeah, absolutely. That's the great thing about the API. So as I said, the two that I showed, we're going straight to the database just to see what we could do. I wouldn't recommend that in production for that reason. The API, one of the reasons it exists is to enforce that business logic. So our API today is read-only on purpose. If we ever did a read-write API, we would want to implement all of the controls that are in the UI. So that's RBAC, permissions models, and making sure that, yeah, you're not just randomly writing stuff. So APIs, when they're built well, which I'd like to think we're building it right, enforce that business logic. It's just another UI layer that machines can work with. Yeah.